Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling something huge, a moment in history that didn't just change things, it literally rerouted the future of the world. We're talking about how Christianity even became Christianity. So how does a tiny Jewish sect explode into a global religion? You might think it was this slow, organic process, right? Well, not exactly. The real answer, believe it or not, comes down to one guy, a really revolutionary and, frankly, super controversial figure. And this slide really lays it all out. You start over here with this very exclusive group, totally focused on Jewish law. And you end up over here with a global faith that's open to literally anyone. It's a mind-blowing transformation. And the person pulling the levers? Yep, it's almost all down to the wild ideas of the Apostle Paul. All right, let's zoom in on the man himself, the guy right in the middle of this whole storm. Who exactly was Paul? And what made his ideas so foundational, but also so incredibly disruptive? Okay, and here's the twist, the big irony of the whole story. The person who ends up steering this Jesus movement away from its Jewish origins was, and you can't make this up, a self-described Hebrew of the Hebrews. I mean, we're talking about a super devout, law-abiding Jew, and that's exactly why what he says later hits so hard. Check out this timeline, because this is huge. Paul's letters, they are the absolute earliest Christian writings we have, full stop. We're talking about 20 years before anyone even wrote the first gospel, the Gospel of Mark. So think about that. Paul isn't just commenting on the Gospels. His theology is the first written down version of what it means to be a Christian. Okay, so now we get to the real heart of the fight. It all came down to a brand new, totally revolutionary idea about how you're saved. And this idea put Paul on a collision course with, well, pretty much all of Jesus's original followers back in Jerusalem. The whole argument really comes down to this one big word, soteriology. I know, it sounds complicated, but it's really asking a super simple but absolutely fundamental question. How do you get right with God? And the different answers to that single question, well, they're what ripped the whole movement in two. And here you can see the two sides staring each other down. In one corner, you've got the Jerusalem crew, Jesus's original disciples. Their view was pretty straightforward. To follow Jesus, you had to become Jewish. That meant following all the laws of Moses, circumcision, the whole deal. But then you have Paul's view, which was just radical. He said, nope, the law isn't how you do it anymore. It's all about faith. And Paul's logic here was simple, but it was absolutely devastating for the traditionalists. He basically said, look, everybody sins, right? Nobody's perfect, so nobody can perfectly follow the law. That means the law can't possibly be the way you're saved. He saw it as a dead end. Something totally new was needed. This is the real game changer. Paul's theology totally flips the script on what Jesus' death meant. See, under Jewish law at the time, being crucified, dying on a tree, was seen as a sign that you were cursed by God. But Paul comes along and says, no, you're looking at it all wrong. That wasn't a failure. That was the plan. That was the divine solution. He argued that Jesus' death basically made the old law obsolete, creating a brand new way to be saved that was open to anyone, anywhere, just by believing. So, you can probably guess what happened next. This idea, it caused an absolute uproar, a massive crisis. It got so bad, they had to call a huge, high-stakes meeting in Jerusalem to basically figure out the future. Were they going to stay a Jewish group, or were they about to become something else entirely? So they have this big meeting. We call it the Council of Jerusalem. And Paul, he scores a huge win. The leaders actually agree that non-Jews, or Gentiles, don't have to get circumcised to join up. But, and this is a big but, it was a compromise. The Gentiles still had to follow some of the Jewish food laws. And that little detail, that question of ritual purity, it was left hanging in the air, totally unresolved. And that one unresolved issue, that shaky compromise, it was basically a ticking time bomb. And it was about to explode into this very public and very personal showdown between the two biggest names in the entire movement. For a little while, it actually looked like it might work, you know? After the big meeting, it seemed like maybe the two sides could get along. Over in the city of Antioch, you had this amazing mixed community of Jewish and non-Jewish believers, all living and working together. It was thriving. But the question was this peace real? Or were they just kind of ignoring a giant crack right down the middle of their foundation? Well, a super dramatic event in Antioch was about to answer that question with a very, very loud no. And this is exactly how it all went down. It fell apart so fast.
So at first, you've got Peter, the Apostle Peter, leader of the pack. He's in Antioch, eating with the non-Jewish believers. Everything's great, but then a group of hardliners shows up from Jerusalem, sent by James, Jesus' brother. And suddenly, Peter gets scared. He caves to the pressure and just stops eating with the Gentiles. He separates himself.
For Paul, this was just a massive betrayal. It wasn't about what was on the menu. This was about the heart and soul of the gospel. His whole point was that faith in Jesus made everyone equal. So if you separate at the dinner table, you're being a hypocrite. You're basically saying the gospel isn't true. So Paul, he calls Peter out right there in front of everyone. He confronts him to his face.
And that showdown in Antioch, that wasn't just a friendly disagreement. That was it. That was the point of no return. After a public blow-up like that, a formal split wasn't just possible anymore, it was basically guaranteed.
When you boil it all down, the whole movement broke apart over a really simple, practical question. Can we even eat a meal together? The fact that they couldn't just break bread together, it proved that the gap in their beliefs was just too wide to cross. The two roads had split and there was no going back.
And Paul winning this ideological war, the results were absolutely staggering. By kicking down the walls of Jewish law, he basically opened the floodgates. Suddenly, this massive wave of non-Jewish converts poured in, and that completely changed everything. The movement's DNA, its future, its destiny forever.
So that leaves us with one last, kind of crazy thought to chew on. What if Paul had lost that fight? What if the Jerusalem side had won? The Jesus movement probably would have just stayed a small little group inside Judaism, which makes you wonder, without the revolution sparked by this one guy, would the Christianity we know today even exist?